There was a time when Nicolas Cage seemed completely unstoppable. He wasn't just another Hollywood actor. He was one of the biggest stars on the planet, earning millions for every movie he touched. At the height of his career, he owned castles in Europe, a private island, rare comic books, luxury cars, and even a dinosaur skull that had fascinated collectors around the world. From the outside, it looked like he had achieved everything anyone could ever dream of. But behind the luxury was a disaster quietly waiting to happen within only a few years. The empire he had spent decades building collapsed almost overnight. The financial crisis hit without warning. The IRS came after him for millions of dollars, and one by one, his prized possessions disappeared. The castles were sold. The island was gone. His famous comic book collection vanished. Even his family was dragged into the painful consequences. Yet what destroyed Nicolas Cage wasn't simply expensive purchases. According to the story, his greatest mistake was trusting the wrong person to manage his fortune. That decision nearly erased everything he had worked for throughout his life. Before we uncover that shocking collapse, we have to go back to where it all began. Long before he became one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, Nicolas Cage entered the world with a name that carried enormous expectations. Born on January 7, 1964, in Long Beach, California, he came from one of the most respected families in the entertainment industry. His father taught comparative literature at a university, while his mother worked as a dancer and choreographer. His grandfather was the celebrated composer Carmen Coppola, and his famous uncle was legendary filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, the director behind the Godfather trilogy. On paper, it looked like Nicolas had been born with every advantage imaginable, but life inside the family was far from glamorous. His mother battled schizophrenia and severe depression, illnesses that completely changed the atmosphere inside their home. As Nicolas grew older, he watched her disappear for long periods inside psychiatric hospitals. Sometimes she couldn't even remember what had happened during her episodes. For most children, a mother represents safety and stability. For Nicolas, childhood became a lesson in uncertainty. By the age of 6, hospital visits had become part of everyday life. By 12, his parents' marriage had fallen apart under the weight of his mother's illness. His father suddenly had to raise him while trying to hold the family together. Instead of breaking down emotionally, Nicolas developed another way to survive. He learned to hide his feelings. Years later, he explained that children raised around severe mental illness often become intensely alert. They're always watching, always preparing for the next crisis, always expecting something to go wrong. That constant vigilance would later become one of the defining characteristics of his acting. Even as a teenager, Nicolas dreamed of escaping reality through movies. His first experience in Hollywood came with a tiny appearance in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It wasn't glamorous. He played one of Brad's unnamed friends in a fast food restaurant, barely noticeable to audiences. But something unexpected happened. Instead of celebrating his first role, everyone focused on his famous last name, because he was credited as Nicolas Coppola. Cast members constantly joked about his famous uncle. They quoted lines from Apocalypse Now, teased him about family connections, and made him feel as though every opportunity existed only because of his relatives. The pressure became unbearable. Nicolas didn't want people to see Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. He wanted them to see him. So he made one of the boldest decisions of his young career. He abandoned the Coppola name completely, inspired partly by Marvel's Luke Cage and partly by avant-garde composer John Cage. He reinvented himself as Nicolas Cage, hoping nobody would judge him by his family connections anymore. It wasn't simply a stage name. It was a declaration of independence. Ironically, the decision created even more problems. Some people inside Hollywood viewed it as an act of rebellion against his own family. According to the source material, even Francis Ford Coppola withdrew much of his support after the name change. Instead of opening doors, Nicolas suddenly found many of them closing. Most people would have accepted defeat. Nicolas refused. Still only 17 years old, he dropped out of Beverly Hills High School because he believed acting mattered more than sitting inside a classroom. But leaving school didn't instantly make him a movie star. He needed money. He worked at the Fairfax Theater selling movie tickets and popcorn for minimum wage. Between customers, he'd quietly watch films and imagine himself someday standing on the other side of the screen. He even delivered pizzas just to survive. There were no luxury cars. No private islands. No castles. Just long workdays, minimum wages, and an impossible dream. Everything changed when he auditioned for Valley Girl, made on a tiny budget in only a few weeks. Nobody expected much from the film, yet audiences fell in love with it. Nicolas played Randy, an emotional punk rocker whose unforgettable energy immediately caught Hollywood's attention. He screamed with such raw intensity that directors realized they were looking at someone completely different from every other young actor. For the first time, people weren't talking about Francis Ford Coppola's nephew. They were talking about Nicolas Cage. That single performance became the foundation of everything that followed. Soon afterward, he appeared in Rumblefish, continuing to prove he wasn't interested in taking the easy path. Even when given smaller roles, he transformed every detail of his appearance and performance, determined to make audiences remember him. But perhaps the most painful rejection was still waiting. When auditions were held for The Outsiders, Nicolas desperately wanted one particular role. He spent 2 weeks studying photographs, changing his appearance, and preparing himself completely. In the end, his own uncle rejected him again. The role went to another actor. Instead of accepting a consolation prize, Nicolas walked away. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted respect. That stubborn determination would eventually make him one of the most fearless performers in Hollywood. But it would also push him toward decisions that few other actors would ever dare make. And those dangerous choices would soon begin changing his life forever. Breaking away from the shadow of the Coppola name was only the beginning. Nicolas Cage wasn't interested in becoming just another handsome leading man. While many young actors carefully protected their image and searched for safe, predictable roles, Cage wanted something completely different. He wanted to become the kind of performer audiences would never forget, even if it meant putting his own body and mind through unbelievable pain. That obsession would soon earn him a reputation unlike anyone else in Hollywood. Throughout the mid-1980s, Cage accepted role after role, but he never approached them the same way. He believed acting wasn't simply about memorizing lines. To him, every character had to be lived, felt, and suffered through. Sometimes, that commitment shocked directors. Other times, it terrified them. One of the first examples came with Birdie. The film followed a Vietnam War veteran carrying deep emotional and physical scars. Most actors would have relied on makeup and careful performances to portray the damage. Nicolas Cage had another idea. To understand his character's suffering, he pulled out 2 of his own baby teeth without anesthesia. Then he wrapped his head tightly in bandages and refused to remove them for 5 straight weeks, not just while filming, but while eating, sleeping, and living his everyday life. When production finally ended and the bandages came off, the damage was obvious. His skin had broken down, painful acne had spread across his face, ingrown hairs covered much of his skin. But when the cameras rolled, every painful detail looked completely real. Birdie wasn't a major box office success, but critics noticed something extraordinary. Nicolas Cage wasn't pretending anymore. He was becoming the characters he played. That reputation only grew stronger. Later, that same year, he appeared in Racing with the Moon alongside Sean Penn. Once again, Cage searched for ways to make every scene feel authentic. During one sequence, he reportedly cut himself with a knife to experience real pain before filming. It was dangerous, completely unnecessary. Yet directors began realizing they had discovered an actor willing to go much further than anyone else. His next transformation required changing his entire body. For The Boy in Blue, Cage portrayed 19th century rowing champion Ned Hanlon. Instead of relying on movie magic, he trained like a professional athlete. He learned competitive rowing and gained roughly 30 pounds of muscle to match the physical appearance of the legendary sportsman. Although the film struggled at the box office, Cage's performance earned him a Genie Award nomination, Canada's highest honor in film. Even when the movies failed, people remembered Nicolas Cage. But perhaps no performance divided Hollywood more than Peggy Sue Got Married, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. The film reunited uncle and nephew one final time. Instead of playing the romantic lead in a traditional way, Cage created one of the strangest voices audiences had ever heard. Inspired by a clay animation horse named Pokey, he adopted an unusual nasal speaking style and even wore prosthetic teeth to complete the character. His co-star Kathleen Turner hated it. She reportedly begged the director to stop Cage from performing that way. By the beginning of the 1990s, Nicolas Cage had already built a reputation unlike anyone else in Hollywood. Directors knew he would do almost anything for a role. Critics couldn't stop talking about his unpredictable performances. Audiences never knew what to expect every time his name appeared on a movie poster, but despite all that respect, he still hadn't become one of Hollywood's biggest box office stars. That was about to change. In 1990, Cage stepped into a completely different world with Firebirds, playing elite U.S. Army helicopter pilot Jake Preston. It was his first true action movie, filled with real Apache helicopters, military advisors, and dangerous flight sequences. The production invested heavily in realism, with more than 100 military personnel assisting throughout filming. While critics compared the movie to Top Gun with helicopters, Cage embraced the challenge. For the first time, audiences saw him as more than an eccentric dramatic actor. They saw an action hero. But while Firebirds introduced a tougher side of Cage, another film released that same year revealed his artistic side once again. That movie was Wild at Heart. Directed by the legendary David Lynch, Cage played Sailor Ripley, a rebellious drifter obsessed with Elvis Presley. One detail became instantly iconic. The snakeskin jacket. Many viewers assumed it had been created by the costume department. It hadn't. According to the source material, the jacket actually belonged to Nicolas Cage himself. He had bought it at a thrift store on Melrose Avenue and kept it in his closet for nearly a year, waiting for the perfect opportunity to wear it on screen. Eventually, the jacket became part of the screenplay itself. When Sailor proudly declared that it represented a symbol of my individuality and belief in personal freedom, audiences weren't just hearing dialogue. They were hearing Nicolas Cage's own philosophy. The film shocked audiences with its violence and disturbing imagery. During early test screenings, hundreds of people reportedly walked out before it ended. But something remarkable happened. Despite the controversy. Wild at Heart won the prestigious Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. Hollywood could no longer ignore him. Nicolas Cage wasn't simply taking strange roles, he was creating unforgettable characters. Still, one performance remained ahead that would forever change his career. In 1995, Cage accepted what many believed was an impossible role. Leaving Las Vegas. He played Ben Sanderson, a hopeless alcoholic who decides to drink himself to death after losing everything. Most actors would have relied on research. Nicolas Cage went much further. According to the source material, he attended addiction support meetings, studied alcohol extensively, and even consumed real alcohol during parts of filming to understand the physical effects. Director Mike Figgis later confirmed there was a scene where Cage became so intoxicated he could barely stand. The result was breathtaking. Every emotion felt painfully real. Every scene carried heartbreaking authenticity. When audiences watched Ben Sanderson slowly destroy himself, many forgot they were watching an actor. They believed they were watching a real man. The performance earned Nicolas Cage the Academy Award for Best Actor. Finally. He stood at the very top of Hollywood. Years of rejection. Years of strange performances. Years of taking enormous risks. Everything had finally paid off. But success always comes with a price. While Cage celebrated the greatest achievement of his career, his personal life quietly began falling apart. He had married Patricia Arquette in 1995, but only months later, the relationship began to unravel. Although they remained legally married for several years, the emotional distance between them had already become impossible to ignore. The role that won him an Oscar had also drained him emotionally. Yet, Hollywood wasn't finished rewarding him. Instead of slowing down after his Oscar victory, Nicolas Cage exploded into superstardom. In 1996 came The Rock, the high-budget action thriller paired Cage with Sean Connery in a story involving chemical weapons and Alcatraz Island. The film became a massive worldwide success, but filming wasn't easy. According to the source material, one action sequence involving simulated VX nerve gas affected Cage so intensely that he temporarily experienced vision problems. The production had worked closely with experts to recreate realistic symptoms, pushing the actors through physically exhausting scenes. The sacrifices were paying off. Only 1 year later came another blockbuster. Con Air. This time, Cage transformed into Cameron Poe, a former Army Ranger trapped aboard a prison transport plane filled with some of America's most dangerous criminals. The movie became an instant hit. His long hair, Southern accent, and unforgettable line, "Put the bunny back in the box," became pop culture history. Interestingly, that famous line wasn't originally part of the script. According to the source material, Nicolas Cage improvised it himself, but behind the excitement of filming, tragedy struck. During production, stunt performer Philip Schwartz lost his life in a devastating accident involving a model aircraft during an emergency landing sequence. Behind the explosions and thrilling action scenes, a real family was left mourning. It served as a painful reminder that blockbuster filmmaking could carry devastating consequences away from the cameras. Still, the biggest challenge of Cage's career was only months away. In Face Off, he was asked to do something almost impossible. Play both the hero. And the villain, using groundbreaking facial scanning technology. The production created incredibly lifelike replicas of the actors' faces. According to the source material, seeing his own artificial double disturbed Cage so deeply that the crew had to clear the set while he gathered himself. The makeup process was exhausting. The prosthetics irritated his skin. Long shooting days pushed everyone to their limits, but when the film premiered, it became another worldwide blockbuster. Together, The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off turned Nicolas Cage into one of the biggest action stars of the entire decade. His career had reached heights few actors ever experienced. The awards, the fame, the money. It seemed like nothing could stop him now. But success can sometimes become more dangerous than failure. Because with millions of dollars pouring in, Nicolas Cage would soon begin spending money faster than almost anyone in Hollywood history, and the purchases he made over the next few years, would eventually destroy the fortune he'd spent a lifetime building.